Hey everyone, welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. I'd love to take a moment to tell you a bit about Jane, our show sponsor. We love Jane. Jane is an all-in-one practice management software designed to be helpful to you, the PT community, no matter where or how you practice. Jane's mission is to help people like us, people who are growing and managing our small businesses, and they do it by creating software that's easy to use, beautiful to look at, and actually helpful. With features like online booking, online intake, easy charting, simplified payment processing means less admin work by you, less money that you have to pay for people to do that admin work for you, and that lets you spend more time doing what you love, helping people, and making more money along the way. If you think Jane could be a good fit for your practice, head on over to jane.app/physicaltherapy to learn more, and when you sign up, don't forget to mention the PT on Ice Daily Show in your sign-up notes for a 1-month free grace period to help you in your switch from your current EMR to Jane. Enjoy today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of the clinical management of the fitness athlete pregnancy and postpartum team. We have two courses that we offer in our pregnancy and postpartum division. We have our 8-week online course that focuses on everything from preconception all the way to return to barbell lifting. And then we have our new live course, 2-day live course that teaches the clinician everything from the internal assessment to how to get people back to gymnastics. So if you are interested in either of those courses, our next online cohort starts end of April, and we are in Greenville, South Carolina at the end of this month for our next open course for our live 2-day course. Today is the final day of the 2022 CrossFit Open. If you have been seeing all of the ICE stories, you know that a good portion of the ICE faculty are getting after it and doing these workouts with a variety of different goals. And I know I can speak for myself, but I know that there are a lot of people that are following ICE as well that are in that pregnant or postpartum camp. And for CrossFit athletes, I've talked about this a lot on previous podcasts, that it can be really challenging because while you are so thankful to be pregnant and to be able to become a parent, and you have to respect where your body is at postpartum, it can also be extremely frustrating that your athletic window and your fertility window directly overlap. And it comes to the forefront of an athlete's mind when she's in her pregnancy or they are in their postpartum journey when the CrossFit Open is here. Because all you want to do is send it at Friday Night Lights with your community. And sometimes that's just not the case. So what I thought for today that we could do is we could start going through some of the workouts, some of the modifications that the faculty gave as suggestions for these workouts for the pregnant and postpartum athlete, and then kind of talk through the justification or why we gave some of the recommendations that we did. In my mind, as we're going through different themes on how I'm making modifications for the pregnant or postpartum athlete, that I kind of think through a couple of different filters. So number one, do we actually have justification to be modifying this exercise? Sometimes we think, oh, well, we have to do a scaled version of the workout because this person is pregnant. And yes, that might be the case, but also no, that might not be the case. Same thing with the postpartum person. If they are in their first 6 months postpartum, their body might not be ready for impact, load, or different stimuli that come into the CrossFit workouts, but they also might be. So we have to make sure that that's our filter first, is are we just modifying for the sake of modifying, or do we have a true clinical justification for why we are making these suggestions? Number two is, are we keeping the stimulus of the workout, right? Are we in the time domain? Are we at the intensity that is the goal of this workout? So an example would be like the bar muscle up. So the bar muscle up came into 22.3. You had to kind of earn your way with progressively heavier load on the thruster. You had to get through a bunch of pull-ups and chest to bar. Oftentimes what I see the recommendation for with a bar muscle up is to do like a rack chin or a ring row and a dip. If you do a bar muscle up, it probably takes you about a second or two to get up and over the rig, right? That's the cycling time. It's pretty high intensity. It's a high velocity, high power output movement, requires quite a bit of upper body strength. If you modify that to a ring row, to a dip, one, you're adding an additional transition. Two, the intensity is way down. And three, the amount of time it's going to take to do those combined movements is probably about 10 to 12 seconds versus the 2 seconds it's going to take for the bar muscle up. So we have to think like that kind of just doesn't make sense. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about those things as we are making recommendations around modifications. And then the third things is that you want to make sure that your athletes have guideposts. We always hate, it depends, but I actually love it depends because it means that I can put the self-efficacy of when and how to modify on my athlete. I'm going to say these are the recommendations that I'm giving. If you want to try it RX or start at RX, these are the things you are looking for. And don't just spit out every pelvic health issue, right? We are not going to say, okay, you're going to do a pull-up, you're going to be looking for heaviness, leaking, all these types of things, because this is a core dominant movement. So we're looking at core considerations. So we're thinking about core integrity, maybe some doming or coning, rehab for diastasis recti. When we're thinking about a barbell movement and how we're modifying a barbell movement, we're going to be thinking, okay, we're probably looking at incontinence and pelvic heaviness in the circumstance of pelvic organ prolapse. You have no change in length of the abdominal wall. You should not be looking for coning or doming when you're doing a squat, right? Because there is no flexion and extension of the trunk, or at least there shouldn't be. So we don't need to be thinking and adding that extra cognitive load to our client because that isn't something that we're really worried about. What you might feel in a squat is that if you do have a person whose abdominal wall, we're still working on that strengthening piece, they may not feel very strong in their brace. But that isn't something that we need to think of as a guidepost for them because it's going to limit them in what they're going to be able to put on the bar anyway. So those are kind of the three things, right? What is the stimulus of the workout? Do not modify for the sake of modifying, and make sure that your client knows their guideposts and then what to do if they get those guideposts, right? Leaking with double unders. They start to pee. What do? Do they all of a sudden abandon the exercise? No, right? If they're peeing at 20 reps, we're going to start getting them at 17 or 18. Get them to take a breath. Think about their positions. Know where they tend to go to under fatigue. And does that lead to an increased likelihood of putting extra pressure on the pelvic floor, increased strain that may be a little bit more susceptible to leaking? So things that we're going to be thinking about. All right, first workout. Wall walks, 3 wall walks, 12 dumbbell snatches at 35 pounds, 15 burpee box jump overs, and you had to step down. The awesome part about this workout is that for my postpartum athlete, I didn't really have any modifications that I was going to give to them. This is pretty, as long as their body was strong enough to handle the weight on the dumbbell snatch. A lot of times they didn't have any issues with the wall walk. They may have a little bit more like movement side to side laterally because of core strength. But again, that would limit performance. I didn't need to like tell them that this is something from a pathology perspective that they needed to modify. If they were breathing, because this was 12 repetitions, so they should not be close to their 1 rep max snatch on that dumbbell movement because it's a lot of reps. It's pretty quick cycle time. And then the box jump step overs, a lot of times my athletes are experiencing that incontinence on box jumps on the rebound, and they remove the rebound. So it's a nice way to start gradually getting some loading through the pelvic floor in a way that did not create a lot of susceptibility to leaking. So for the postpartum athlete 22.1, I actually didn't have a ton of modifications that I was giving for them. For the postpartum athlete, we were just making considerations for the wall walk, starting from a long arm variation or getting them to recover in side lying. If they wanted to continue to get by the wall, they could have done more of a pike position or like an inchworm variation if they were further along in their pregnancy and they didn't feel as comfortable at the wall. And then doing step ups instead of that box jump over. So that first workout, I wasn't actually making a ton of changes. The actual raw movements themselves, I was keeping almost exactly the same. and you were able to kind of go at that moderate pace throughout that workout. So in terms of the pregnant and postpartum space, that was fine. And I love that because we had a lot of these athletes who are continuing to get after it in that workout. When we went to 22.2, same thing, right? For my postpartum athlete, it's was your body ready to hit that deadlift weight? So this was 1 up to 10, down back to 1 of um, deadlifts at 155 and bar facing burpees. A lot of people were giving modifications for burpees that were in the higher or getting them in long arm plank variations, for example. And when you don't have a baby bump anymore, you don't need to be doing that, right? They can go down to the ground. It's harder. They might have a little bit of stretch on extension if there's a C-section, that our method of birth was via C-section. But a lot of times for my postpartum athletes, they're not going to have to modify that burpee anymore. It's just really difficult. So for the postpartum athlete in 22.2, it was just, is 155 closer to 90% of your 1 rep max or closer to 50%? And that was the decision about if you were scaling down that weight. For the pregnant athlete, we were, again, just similar to the wall walks where we didn't want to have the athlete on their stomach. We were doing long arm variations, and then the same conversation was happening with the weight. Is 155 and a weight that you have been exposed to recently in your pregnancy? Or is this like 85-90% of your 1 rep max before your pregnancy? The exposure during pregnancy is important because it depends on what your body is used to, how you're controlling your bracing and things like that, so that one, we don't want to be getting into the habit of really comparing to pre-pregnancy numbers all the time. And two, we don't want to all of a sudden not have been doing heavy deadlifts for the last 28 weeks for your pregnancy and then hammering 100 reps at 155 pounds. It's just not the best training day for you. And that's where we kind of look at the cost benefits of that. But a lot of my pregnant athletes are still hitting over 200 pounds in their deadlift. So 155 pounds was very manageable for them. They were working on breathing throughout their movement pattern, and they were able to go at a moderate pace at the RX weight. So again, a pretty friendly pregnant postpartum modification. We didn't have to do a ton, which was really exciting for, again, a lot of my athletes who wanted to still be with their community and continue to do the workouts kind of how they were intended to be experienced. But then we get to 22.3, and that is the big kahuna of pelvic health modifications. You knew it was coming. It was like the trifecta of really fatiguing your core with the pull-up progressions, really getting at impact with the double unders, and then starting to really load that pelvic floor when it came to lifting. Honestly, this is like the last 3 weeks of our course. We started talking about returning to gymnastics, returning to impact, and returning to barbell lifting. And they just smushed it all together into one really nasty workout. So the third workout was pull-ups, chest to bar, and bar muscle ups at 21, 18, 15. Then it was 42, 36, 30 double unders, and then 21, 18, 15 at progressively heavier thruster weights. And so for the postpartum athlete, the question becomes, what are your gymnastic skills looking like? And what is your core rehab looking like? Just where you're at in your journey postpartum. Oftentimes too, the skill and reps of this workout were a limiting factor for a lot of athletes when it came to the gymnastics piece. This was a workout that if my athlete decided that they were okay with having a little bit of toming or coning to get a couple of chest to bar pull-ups in, I wasn't really worrying about that. We're going to see that as individuals are closing in that ab wall, they're going to see more of an approximation of the recti muscles if they have a bit of doming or coning in one workout right towards the end of the open because they want to do it RX and they've been doing it RX the entire time. That is not something that I am going to stress about, and that is not something that is going to completely derail their rehabilitation. So we have to make sure that our messaging is very clear. And the same thing is true for that postpartum athlete who decides that they really want to send it on the double unders. So there was 42, 36, 30, not huge chunks of repetitions, but quite a lot for individuals who are trying to get back I had been having leaking after about 5 double unders up into a couple of weeks before the open. And then I was able to start stringing them together with some coaching tweaks from my lovely other CMFA faculty. Um, but if my athlete decided that they were just going to wear a pad and black pants and they were just going to go for it and they knew that they were going to leak and they were okay with that, and then we are going to start with the rehab process today because the open was over. We can have people accept that choice, right? I always think that it's so interesting that we can place shame on athletes for leaking during activities like this, but Scott Panchik in his last session at the games had a knee injury and he competed the entire time because it was his last season, and everyone thought he was so brave and how hardcore and how what an amazing role model. But so he's in knee rehab, but if someone is in pelvic floor rehab and they decide that they're going to accept that they're, instead of pain, they're going to have leaking, that all of a sudden it's something that we're going to be like all up in arms about on the internet. So if my athlete was accepting that, I was totally fine with that. If they wanted to try and prevent any leaking from happening, then we're going to be making sure that they're in the right movements. We're going to be taking it in smaller sets, taking a couple of deep breaths, and making sure that we're not trying to really speed up the rope, because we see a ramp up in the amount of core activation, which is going to increase the inner abdominal pressure as we speed up the rotations on the rope. So ways that we can start like that, getting that land soft, slower speed for athletes who have proficiency, that they can move the speed of the double under up and down. Getting them to be a little bit slower can decrease that strain and pressure on the pelvic floor and reduce that likelihood of leaking. And then the thruster, we have to decide where their threshold is if they're having leaking with that barbell movement and what that's going to look like. For the pregnant athlete, the biggest modification and the justification that I wanted to go through was on the pull-up series. So oftentimes people are given, I kind of went through the bar muscle up example of the ring row and dip. Oftentimes ring rows are given as a modification. Ring rows are great. They are excellent exercises. Sometimes they're harder than pull-ups because in CrossFit we do so much vertical pulling. But the main thing is that the stimulus of a pull-up is a vertical pull, and the stimulus of a ring row is a horizontal pull. And so the modifications that we gave were to do a rack chin, so that a person was setting a barbell up on the rig at a height, and then they were underneath it doing a pull with an upper with a leg assist, so your feet were on the ground. And then what we could do was that we could do the rack chin to the chin, rack chin to the chest, and then for the bar muscle up, we could start bringing it down towards the belly button. Range of motion for that belly button inverted row is going to be obviously dependent on how big a person's baby bump is and how far along they are in their pregnancy, but it's giving the same stimulus of where on their body that they are trying to reach the bar to. And it's going to be roughly the same amount of time as a person who is doing a kipping pull up or chest to bar or bar muscle up. So again, making sure that we are going through these filters. Are we modifying for the sake of modifying, or is there a justification or a reason why we're doing that? Make sure that the stimulus is appropriate. And then and the example with the double unders, when you hit that guidepost where your body is telling you that you're under fatigue or that your pelvic floor is now becoming your limiting factor, what are the things that we are going to do? Like if this, then that, so that your athletes feel in control and have that self-efficacy, that they know how they are going to experience the CrossFit Open. I love the competition and community that comes from the CrossFit Open. This was my first time that I was far enough postpartum. I'm 6 months postpartum right now, that I was able to RX all of the workouts. I ripped the bejeebas out of my hands, but I'm going to get grips, I promise. But it was just so fun. So I hope that all of you listening, if you were able to participate this year, that you had a ton of fun, that you pushed yourself farther than you thought you were going to push yourself, that you have some objective data that now you can repeat those workouts and see how you stack up next year. And that if you had anything pelvic health related, that you were able to modify in a way that you still felt good about your performance in those workouts. If you have any questions about how we would modify exercises, we talk about this a lot in our online courses. So if you're interested, our next cohort for CMFA pregnancy and postpartum is at the end of April. You can go to ptonice.com and get signed up. Otherwise, hopefully we'll see you at a live course, and enjoy the beginning of your week.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.